how we see our world and what we see in our world and the way we interpret our world, all those things are a matter of what's going on within us.
Hello, yogis, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Dharma Talk. I'm your host, Henry Winslow, and this is episode number 39. I'm reporting in from California. I just got back to the United States after a very quick trip to China. I was there competing in the International Yoga Sport Federation Championships, and I'm happy to say that I came back with the gold for USA. And I'm not saying that to brag, but more to express my appreciation for all of you that helped me get there. There are lots of different ways that you might have supported me by listening to this show. That's one of them. Also, a number of you donated to my travel fund. And honestly, I have to say I would not have been able to go if it weren't for your support. So if you came to the gratitude practice class in Lighthouse or you donated online, thank you so much. There's really a happy ending at the end of it. So I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you. And along that same note, today, I want to say special thank you to Sally Olafsson for making a donation to support Dharma Talk. I'm also very grateful for that. And if anyone ever wants to make a donation to keep this podcast up and running, you can do that at http://dharmatalk.show. Okay, now about today's episode. Today, my guest is a medical doctor of Qi Gong and traditional Chinese medicine. Pretty cool. We have not had anyone like that on the show so far. His name is Dr. Word Smith. And Word is actually part of the Science of Self yoga teacher trainings, along with Rose Aaron Vaughn, who I interviewed on episode number 3, and Yoshio Hama, who was episode number 34. So if you haven't heard those, check back and you can get the full picture of what sorts of expertise these people bring to the table. Now, in this conversation with Word, we talk about why, at a very practical level, helping others is the key to your happiness. We also talk about how to change your life circumstances by working from the inside out. Word shares a simple and universal 4-step path to creating any change or result that you desire. That's a really cool part. Don't miss that part of the interview. And lastly, he leaves us with one powerful Chinese herb that all yogis can benefit from, and you can find it at your local supermarket. Also, you can hear about some other ways that you can learn from Word about traditional Chinese medicine if you're interested in doing that. So please stay tuned through these announcements, and we'll dive into this interview with Dr. Word Smith. California friends, I am headed your way and very excited to be teaching a backbending workshop at YogaWorks Costa Mesa on Sunday, December 9th. That's Orange County, Southern California. If you can't come, send me a message. Maybe we can meet up for a class or something. For my friends here in New York, I've got a workshop at the end of January at 3 Jewels. So details for all my events, upcoming and to be planned, are at HENRYWINS.com/events. Go there and sign up. At Lighthouse Yoga School in Brooklyn, New York, we are currently enrolling our next 200-hour teacher training for January 2019. So, yoga teachers looking to level up your teaching, aspiring yoga teachers who want to do your first training, or yoga students who just want to take their practice a little bit deeper. You can get more information about that also at henrywins.com/events. And if you apply now using my referral code HENRYWINS, you'll save $100 on your tuition. There's no fee to apply, so go ahead, put your application in, drop the referral code, and lock in $100 off. What's your purpose? What's your vision? What mark will you leave on this planet long after you're gone? I'm Henry Winslow, and you're listening to Dharma Talk, the only podcast where I interview inspirational yogis on how they're changing the world in their own unique ways. Whether you're still searching for your purpose or already walking the path, I hope these stories get you excited to live your Dharma. Hello, Dharma Talk community, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I've got my friend Dr. Word Smith on the line. Word is a doctor of medical Qi Gong and has been studying Eastern arts for over 20 years. He is a nomadic yogi roaming the globe, studying language, medicine, philosophy, and the movement practices said to grant liberation in this life. Currently, he teaches domestically and internationally in order to help all living beings. Word, how are you today? Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Henry. I feel amazing, and I'm doing really well.
You know, we were just talking before turning on the recording, and I know that you're out doing some education yourself with your teacher. I think that's really cool and important for all teachers and service people out there to continue your education. So awesome. Props to you for that. And thank you for taking the time out of that schedule to share a little bit with our audience here. We always start with the same opening question, so I want to give you a chance to answer that. What does the word Dharma mean to you, and what is your Dharma as you understand it today?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think one people should be aware of as they move through their day. I mean, the word Dharma, so I'm a language nerd and a Sanskrit scholar, and so the actual word Dharma comes from a root der, which means like to support something. And since Sanskrit is in the same language family group as English and a much older member of that family group, a lot of Sanskrit words come in to English. And so der becomes the word true in English. It becomes the word tree in English. It also becomes the word druid, which is a combination of der and vid, which is like someone who sees the truth. So, I mean, Dharma, the word in Sanskrit classically has about 12 definitions. But generally people use the word to mean like, what is like your code of conduct? What is your truth? Something like that. And that's the way it was used in like the Bhagavad Gita, I believe. I study a lot of Buddhist practices, and sometimes people just call like the words of the Buddha like the Dharma or Buddha Dharma. But really, the way that the Buddha used it, and my teacher to some degree, a Dharma means like that which supports you. That's what der means, like that which supports you or holds you back. So it supports you in doing the things that you'd like to do, and holds you back from doing the things that don't serve you. And basically, I mean, that's what Dharma means to me. It means like the truth or the teachings or the things that support me in my daily life or help me to steer clear of the things that will hurt me. Something like that.
Yeah. And well, thank you for the little lesson there, because it's always nice to hear from someone who has the classical training around these concepts that we discuss often. So thank you for that. And the point of it that I really want to pull out and maybe probe a little bit more on is the the converse side, the negative side of that definition. It's the things that keep you from doing what you should not be doing. I think it's very easy to focus on the positive side, but ignoring the negatives can stand in your way as well. Can you bring us a little bit more onto the personal note for you with how that relates to what you're teaching and what you're spreading?
Yeah, I'd love to, because it's so crucial, and I really wish that everyone at least had an opportunity to hear these teachings so they could decide whether or not they work for them. And yeah, I mean, so much of our lives, I mean, every step we take every day is a decision of like how to act. And all these different traditions, you know, be it Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, you know, Jainism, Taoism, and so on and so forth, they all have like a code of conduct. And the idea of a code of conduct, I think in the West, people think of a code of conduct like just like a bunch of empty rules that make life boring or something like that. Or just like a bunch of arbitrary rules like set down from like, you know, priests or clergy or some higher power to like restrict what you do for no real good reason. And instead, I mean, for me, all these teachings really feed into how I treat people, how I act during the day, what activities I spend my life doing. And those activities that I spend my life doing after a time, become my life, in a sense, or become my lifetime. And it's really important to, for me to see myself living a life that, has a lot of value, not only to myself, but that I also has value for others as well.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
what does your personal practice look like? Because I know that it happens to contain some exercises and work that you do internally, but there's also a major service
Hmm.
component for you, knowing you from, working with you and Aaron and learning a bit
Hmm.
about the Chinese medicine from you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I've been practicing for like consciously for about 20 years now, and my practice has evolved over that time in quite a few different ways. But the main component is the service work, or even say, because a lot of what I do is studying. I do a lot of movement practices, like yoga or other, more like East Asian yoga, like Taoist yoga, like Qigong, Tai Chi type activities, as well as what people in the West would call like energy work, like doing like internal practices to move the prana or chi in my body for very specific reasons, usually to feel better generally or to have more capacity to help people. But yes, service work is the backbone of it all. Um, I mean, the basic understanding is like what you do multiplies and becomes what you see. And so if I see myself helping others, if I see myself, helping people to be happy and so on in the ways I see myself helping them, that in turn becomes how I see my life. I see myself as happier, if I gave, I'll see more money in my bank account, so like really practical things like that. So it's really bare bones, the most practical things that help me feel happier and help others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really core to the teachings of the Buddha, right? I mean, your thoughts are reflections of your
Hmm.
reality and projections of your reality as well. Um, I'd
Hmm.
love to hear a little bit about your background story. Word, how did you come into this path? And I know that you've really gone down the rabbit hole in so many different directions that
Hmm.
I'm sure a lot of us, myself and our listeners, can relate to, getting interested and really pulled down. So, where did that all start for you? And maybe take us through a twist or turn that pulled you in a new direction.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I was a smart kid growing up, and even at a young age, I started to like notice things about the world that maybe would be unusual for a kid, and maybe even usual for some adults. And my parents started to notice the things I was saying were pretty insightful for like a 5-year-old, and I got put into like the quote gifted class, at a young, like in first grade, and from there I was able to, you know, study some things that maybe I wouldn't have gotten to study otherwise. And as well, my father was one of my earliest teachers, and he's a very ardent believer in having a lot of general knowledge about the world as a means to be able to understand and contextualize the greater world. And so that was my educational background through public school, which in a lot of ways I hated because my mind was very expansive, and I would get bored within minutes in certain classes with certain instructors just because I just it just was too slow for me. And so around age 19, after my public schooling, I went to university, and during university is when I became a philosophy major, studying Eastern and Western philosophy. And I also joined the school Taekwondo club, which was very active at that time with my instructor, Lawrence Narcissi. at Temple University. And from there, things started to really open up for me. I started to have unusual experiences, which I couldn't share with almost anyone, because when I would start to share them, they really would look very puzzled about what I was talking about. Later, I realized that these experiences are pretty common in East Asian, or Central Asian, South Asian esoteric schools. Experiences involving like qi, kind of extrasensory perceptions and stuff like that. And after I finished my schooling and got my first degree black belt in Taekwondo, I decided to take the route of studying yoga and Qigong. And that's when things started to get really interesting for me. I basically abandoned all other activities and just studied, holistic nutrition, yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, Capoeira, some other martial arts like Bagua. And my sensory perception started to really awaken beyond the limits of what is considered possible in a lot of kind of Western modern society, such that it put me in a category where I had to find people like me. And I ended up moving to California and studied massage and body work at the Hartwood Institute, along with nutrition, with some esteemed teachers there, including Paul Pitchford, author of Healing with Whole Foods. And that led me into basically wanted to find more and more refined ways to help people with Chinese medicine, with internal martial arts, with yoga. And that's how I studied and got my doctorate in Monterey, California, with Sifu Jerry Allen Johnson. And after that, things really just exploded, and people kind of all over just wanted me to teach them and learn from them, because I had basically immersed myself up until this point, 20 years, in these things, such that I could be a world leader in these arts, especially from the different angles that I had studied them.
Well, there's definitely something to be said for approaching similar topics from lots of different angles. I think that doing that interdisciplinary approach really lends a unique perspective that allows you to serve in a new way. There's something powerful about taking the traditional and revisiting it to create something new. So I definitely agree with you on that. That's very cool. But to go back a little bit on your story, it's hard for me not to notice that you had a proclivity for sort of all things Eastern. Where do you think that came from? Do you believe in past lives, or is it something that you were introduced to from an early age? Where did that all come from?
That's an amazing question. I personally do believe in past lives. They're logical for me. They explain the talents that people come in with above and beyond the genetic chemical model. I honestly do feel like I have been a practitioner in many past lives. More recently, Chinese, because I've gravitated towards so many things Chinese: language, Tai Chi Chuan, Bagua Zhang, massage, Chinese massage, Chinese medicine. I'm a Chinese herbalist. I speak Mandarin a little, and I speak some Cantonese. And my job involves Chinese. So I personally do believe in past lives. They, to me, explain where the mind comes from into this life. So there's not much more explanation. I was not introduced to anything in this life outside of like something you get from like pop culture, cartoons and anime and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So just one day, I just was very interested in these things.
You also mentioned kind of early on in your study of some of the energy movement practices, Qigong, and similar work, that you started to notice sensory perception outside of what you considered to be the norm, and maybe what others considered to be the norm. Talk more about that. What was the experience of that, especially when it was brand new?
Yeah, there was some experiences very young, age 5, age 9, age 12. I had these experiences that I remember. Some of them were just insights, like all of a sudden I just like, at 5, I was like, wow, I'm conscious. And that just dawned on me. Like I was like awake
Yeah.
and aware. At 9, I was just really start contemplating existence itself, in certain ways. At 12, I started to have like what maybe people call like psychic experiences, or like kind of premonitory experiences, and just like a lot of deja vu and kind of very powerful dream experiences. Like not necessarily things happening from my dream, but like kind of just dreams being kind of interwoven with my reality in like a healthy way, in a way that the world is very vibrant and alive for me. Um, but then later on, it became very consistent. Just being able to feel energy and see energy, like auras and that sort of thing, started to happen in my early 20s after I graduated from school, from university. And it was the most interesting thing to me. I mean, I grew up on, you know, X-Men comic books and, you know, the Thundercats, you know, cartoons and that sort of thing. And, you know, I always, in the back of my mind, you know, those things were cartoons and comic books, but I always had this kind of seed of like, no, actually, those things are possible. And, you know, later as a young adult learning, like, supposedly you only use like, I don't know, 2% of our mental capacity. I forget, I don't know the real numbers, but a very small amount. Really feeling like a lot of that could be taken up by, you know, the limiting beliefs stopped us from using the rest of that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just, and those things now have a lot of value. You know, Qigong is becoming more popular, and there's huge amounts of our, you know, culture population that are very interested in Qigong and yoga and these other activities. And yeah, there's
Yeah.
whole fields dedicated to these abilities. Mm-hmm.
Well, you said that, you know, we only use 2% or whatever the number is of our mental capacity. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's a really interesting question, because we have science on the one hand, usually like shown in juxtaposition to an understanding that's more spiritual. But the more you get acquainted to the science, the more you really understand that science is moving and changing in lots of ways that just point to the ambiguity of what we don't know. So even if you can say that
Mm-hmm.
we use 2% of our brain matter, like, does the brain matter even really
Mm-hmm.
explain all the powers? And that's why I think it's
Right.
really cool to study, you know, the cities and these
Mm-hmm.
supernatural powers that are talked about in ancient practices. The other thing I kind of got from your story there is that
Mm-hmm.
you followed a natural interest from a very early age, and there was
Mm-hmm.
no real promise of anything in return. It was just a natural curiosity. And lo and behold, many years later, there is demand for that knowledge. And, you know, what I take away is that if you can follow your gut about what you want to spend your time and attention and curiosity on, it comes back. Like, things have a way of working out, not in the sense necessarily like, oh, you're going to get paid for it, or even have an
Mm-hmm.
exchange of any kind, but there's a reason why,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I honestly believe, you know, and some of what we would call maybe indigenous cultures have more of an emphasis on this as well. You know, we all come in with, you know, very specific talents, and you know, those talents unexplored are a huge waste. You know, it's like I was talking to someone recently, and I made some example like, you know, imagine if like Picasso had been like a pediatrician or a dentist or something. You know, like um, these are all perfectly good jobs, but for the wrong person at the wrong time or with someone with other hidden talents, it could be a huge waste of their, you know, capacity and for humanity at large. And
Right.
so I definitely encourage people to follow that gut on feeling. You know, I had to do a lot of kind of rebellious, you know, activities, you know, to be able to do what I wanted to do because, in public school, with 30 people in a class or what have you, it's difficult to give an individualized education to each student in that sense. And so, yeah, I just had to like not do my schoolwork a lot of times and just kind of do my thing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it did work out in the sense of, both senses of just in my general happiness and what I'm able to give, as well as monetarily. I do get paid for these things now, which is amazing and very fun, fruitful. So yeah, I agree.
Can you take us to a moment, maybe along your journey or your path, where you hit some resistance? Because I'm sure it hasn't been straight and narrow the whole way. Where was there a time where you
Mhm.
hit a conflict, and then what did you do internally or externally to get through that?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I hit conflicts every day, to be honest. It's just to the degree of which, overall, I've dedicated myself to my path, and did a long time ago, such that I refuse to get off of it, and have been through enough obstacles where I'm like, I recognize that they can be overcome, and have seen the fruits of my labors, such that I'm encouraged to continue. But specific examples, oh my God, there's so many. I mean, I didn't have nothing but $6 in my pocket for years, like literally, or less for many years. Or I would get money, would just have to go right to food and bills. And um, I went through Medical Qi Gong school on my own. I paid for it almost all on my own. I did receive assistance from friends and family from time to time when I had to, but I mean, I've had to hitchhike hundreds of miles to get to class and to do everything. What would I do internally and externally? I mean,
Yeah.
internally, it in my view, and this is arguable and not necessarily based on classical text, but some of it is, in my view, how we see our world, and this could be highly controversial for some people, how we see our world and what we see in our world, and how, and the way we interpret our world, all those things are a matter of what's going on within us. And if we really hit certain blocks, I found that the most efficacious way to change those things is to find those thoughts, those beliefs, even the feelings and sensations, and maybe even the physical, like the actual like physical obstructions, which is behind a lot of the asana practice with yoga, in our body, such that to change what's happening on the outside. And I've done this work for a long time, maybe 19 years, and it works for me. And when I see what's going on the outside of my world, I see the blocks that need to still get resolved. And on the outside, I mean, the number one thing is you reap what you sow. So giving someone what you want is the best way to get what you want. Um, you know, I've done a lot of hitchhiking just because I personally don't want to own a car. There's been times when I've had cars or borrowed cars, and at those times, if I see someone on the side of the road, I pick them up. I even go out of my way to pick people up. Not that activity is for everyone. I live in rural places where hitchhiking is actually encouraged, even for the kids. But yeah, no, it's just even simple things like that. And I always find myself with a ride, and I always people let me use their cars, and I always get where I need to go, and I travel quite a bit. So yeah,
Yeah.
internally, yeah, and externally, you have to really check in with yourself and see like what you've done to create where you're at and what you need to do to create what you want.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice. What goes around comes around, and the more you give, the more you get, really.
hmm Basically.
So, Word, would you mind doing maybe a little bit of teaching for our audience of mostly yoga practitioners, maybe about some of the ways that they could use traditional herbs, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something else that you think that our listeners could benefit from in the way of your expertise in Chinese medicine?
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about the backbone of all these teachings. And we can talk from the yoga perspective. So, the main book of yoga is the Yoga Sutras by Master Patanjali. And Patanjali was an amazing historical character. We still have, he's the author, he's basically the author of what is all yoga philosophy. And he also, there's other sources as well, like the Vedas, but he's also the father of Indian classical dance, and he wrote treatises on medicine. So he was a Renaissance man before the Renaissance. And in his text, Yoga Sutras, he writes in the second verse, Yogas Chitti Verti Narodaha. And yogas means yoga. It's just a form of the word yoga. Chitta means like mind, and Verti means like to turn around, and Nirodha means to stop. And that's the definition of yoga in Master Patanjali's view. And if we understand that one verse, we basically can do anything we want in our lives. And if we don't understand that verse, we're basically at the whim of the fates or luck or, God, capital G. And so the basic meaning of that verse is that yoga is stopping how the mind flips everything backwards. And that means if you want to be a yogi or practice yoga, the first thing you have to do is understand that our world is coming from us, not at us. And my teacher likes to use this example called the pen thing. It's a little easier visually, but we can do it audio too. And he holds up a pen and he asks a room of people, he says, "What is this?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, it's a pen." And he says, if a dog came in the room right now and I waved it in front of that dog, what would the dog treat this as? What would it be to the dog? And
Go
everyone's
fetch.
like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly, something to play with, precisely." Or, so we just say like a chew toy, something to chew on. So Henry, which one is it? Is it a pen or is it a chew toy?
It's both. Depends on who's looking.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So if we leave the pen on a table and we take the puppy, the dog, for a walk, and we, at the time when we leave the room, and there's no one there to witness it, what is that item at that time?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's the operative question. It's like the question, and around the world, when my teacher gives this example, people just shrug or they're like nothing, and that's basically all you can say because you can't say. But if the dog comes back in the room, what does the item become at that time?
It goes back to being the chew toy.
Exactly. And if Henry walks back in the room, it becomes a
writing utensil.
Right. And writing utensil. So the understanding would be then that the thing it is not dependent on the item, but is dependent on the perceiver, correct?
Right.
Right. So in that sense, at least, the things we see in our world are coming from us, not at us.
Yeah,
right?
I follow. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the basic. And then there's a leap in here that the yogis talk about, that the Buddha spoke about, and other traditions. I mean, Jesus spoke about it as well. And I think these principles are universal, and that it has nothing to do with the person who said it necessarily. They just understood it and they're putting it forward. But it's like any like if someone teaches you about gravity, you know, you don't necessarily doesn't necessarily mean gravity is exclusive to their teachings. It's just that they're teaching you the principle. So what the yogis and the Buddha and Jesus basically said, as well as others, is that what we do becomes how we see things. So the fact that we gave people pens in the past, that we help people learn higher things, allows us to have the type of mind that sees it as a pen. Because you can be a human and not necessarily be able to cognize certain things. You could have like Alzheimer's, or you could have certain forms of autism, or suffer from certain kinds of brain damage or what have you. That you could still see the same parts and still not be able to put it together as a pen, right?
Right.
So the understanding there is that in your mind is a cause, we call it a seed, that then ripens and becomes like, honestly, if you meditate a lot, you can see this whole process happen directly. And that's why there's such an emphasis on meditation in all these traditions, because you want to be able to see this directly. You can see the process of you actually placing an image in your mind that comes from how you treated others onto objects, that allows you to put the parts of that object together as a specific thing, which then you can use validly as that thing. Like it's validly a pen to you, it's validly a chew toy to the dog, and so on and so forth. And I mean,
Well,
that's the backbone.
Here's a curveball
Please
for you.
go ahead.
What do what do we do if we realize that we've placed a meaning or value on something that we want to course correct away from because we see that it's destructive?
That's an amazing question, and that shows this is the logical question. Any thinking person wants to ask. They're like, okay, if that's true, then what do I do with it? How can I use it? And that's a huge subject in the Yoga Sutras, and it's a huge subject in Chinese philosophy. I mean, the book, the Tao Te Ching, which basically has two subjects: the Tao, which is a description of exactly what I just said in different, verses, and De, which means virtue, can be translated as virtue, which basically means how do you then act if that is the case. Okay, I'll teach you exactly how to act. I mean, basically, what the yogi said is that you should restrict yourself from certain activities, and then you should not restrict yourself from certain activities. And they called those yamas and niyamas, right? Yamas, yep. Yama literally means that which you restrict yourself from. Mm-hmm. It comes from a root, which means the reins of a horse. And niyama means not restrict. So the things that you should do, or like really engage in those activities.
Exercise or observe. Sure.
Yeah, the things you should observe, precisely. But the root of all of those teachings is that what you do is going to be what you become and increase your capacity. So there's a teaching called the 4 steps, and this is to answer your question directly. If you do the 4 steps, you can create anything you want in your world and see it validly as such. So step 1 is decide what you want. So if you're trying to course correct for, say you have a habit of drinking too much coffee, right? Which is something I think a lot of people might deal with, or cigarettes, or some kind of habit that they don't like. So you're like, okay, I no longer want to be addicted to blank. So the thing to do then is
chocolate.
So chocolate, perfect. So step one, you make a 1-line sentence. I no longer want to be addicted to chocolate. Okay. Step 2. Okay, this is the crucial part. You have to find somebody else in the world who needs or wants the same thing. It doesn't have to be exact. It has to be at least along the same lines, though. So they want to, maybe they're an alcoholic and they need support in alcoholism, or they're drug addicted, or something more minor like coffee or cigarettes or chocolate or what have you. It doesn't matter. And so step 2 is you find them. Step 3 is you somehow support them in getting off of that thing. So you see yourself giving them the thing that you want. Because the interesting part of cognition and recognition and perception is that there's no real explanation for the fact that we're seeing a world at all. And some people, one day they're completely addicted. Like my father, actually, he smoked cigarettes for a time. I don't know how long, maybe 10 years or something. One day he was like, this is my last cigarette. And his friends kind of laughed at him. He put his cigarette out in like 1978 or something. That was it. Never smoked again. Other people might struggle with getting off cigarettes for decades. So what is it really, really in the mind that allows somebody to be able to do anything or witness any event? So we say it's step 3. You seeing yourself helping somebody else is what creates that perception for yourself in the future. And then step 4, maybe the most important part, and for some reason it's really hard for people, and that is what we call rejoicing. In Tibetan, it's tartuk. And tartuk basically means the thing you do after you've done the action. And after you did the action, you want to think 2 things to yourself. You want to think, I did the very thing that will get me what I want, period. Just like if you're a farmer and you planted a seed in the ground and you're taking care of those seeds, you're going to think, at harvest time, I'm going to have these plants, based upon the fact that I did the actions. And step 2 is that you think to yourself, I am no longer seeing my world as coming at me either randomly or from fate or luck or God or the gods. I'm instead taking responsibility for my world and using a new system that's logical, that says, if I can see there's a pen, dog sees a chew toy, therefore my world's coming from me, and therefore this makes sense. And the best time to do that is at night before you go to bed. Why? Because when we go to sleep, we experience a state change of consciousness that's very powerful. And if you've ever had a girlfriend or a wife, we know that you don't want to go to bed angry, because in the morning you wake up angry, or it tends to allow things to go on longer. Same thing with this. If you at night think about what you did and think about is it using a new system, then you will experience the results much faster, because it'll work for all that time that you're sleeping in your subconscious. That's the basics.
Very cool. So the 4 steps. First,
yes, the 4 steps.
Acknowledge what it is that you want to change. Number 2, find someone else who has a similar or identical problem. Number 3, help them solve it. And number 4, hardest one, rejoice and celebrate having made a change that causes the outcome that you want. And that's really cool. First of all, 4 steps, a lot easier than the 12. And it turns that old expression, don't count your chickens before they hatch, kind of on its head, right? But I can totally see why. If you can put yourself in the mindset of feeling gratitude and feeling excitement about what you want, the experience that you want, then that's going to manifest that exact outcome to come into your life. And great tip on doing it before bed. Yes, definitely don't want to be stewing and marinating on anger all in your subconscious.
Exactly. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so
Yeah.
Word, can you tell us a little bit about what you're teaching soon in New York?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I have joined Science of Self. I've been teaching with them for a couple years now. It's an organization that teaches yoga teacher trainings as well as educates people on Chinese medicine. And we're really dedicated to putting these teachings into the hands of, the quote common person, so that, lay people, you don't have to necessarily, have a doctorate or go to, 4 or 5 years of school to have these basic tools that can help you and your family. So I've been tasked with teaching an acupressure program in Manhattan. We're still deciding on where the space is going to be, but starting this May, I believe May 20th is the first day. We in 2019, we will be teaching an acupressure program, acupressure 1, acupressure 2, and that's just a type of massage where you press certain points on people's body to help them heal faster or clear
Or
things
your
in
own
their
body?
organs. Yeah, exactly. Or in your own body, like self acupressure. And then also, I'll be teaching a herbal program in New York at the same location with Science of Self, as well as the Three Jewels, New York, for basically lay people, Chinese herbal medicine. Just let me teach you 10 formulas that can help you in like for 10 basic things like insomnia, the common cold, things like that, as well as 5 formulas to strengthen the body in really specific ways, like have more like breathing capacity, stronger muscles, more energy through the day without having to use like, stimulants, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be an amazing program. We're really excited about it. We anticipate that it's going to be full. I think we have like 25, maybe 30 spots available. And yeah, scienceofself .com or .org. You should look around for Rose Aaron
We'll figure
Vaughn.
it out and put it on the show notes for the podcast. So
Yeah,
don't worry about getting the URL right.
thank you so much. I forget it right now.
um,
Yeah, so yeah,
so
that's the basic program.
Totally. Yeah, that's going to be an awesome program. This is actually where Word and I met, was at the one of these acupressure intensives with Rose Aaron Vaughn. And he dropped all the knowledge and I couldn't help but invite him on the podcast. So that's how we got connected. Can you leave our listeners maybe with one short formula or even one herb that they might want to explore associated with a certain benefit or treatment?
Sure. That's a great question. I have found overall one of the best herbs for Americans, if I've experienced Americans, is this wonderful herb called burdock. It's also used in Chinese medicine. It's used in Japanese cooking as well, and it's right on the edge. In China, they have a saying: "Are herbs food or food herbs?" And this herb is right on the edge. I mean, the Japanese call it gobo, and they use it like a vegetable. It's like they use it like carrots or something. I've eaten it raw. I've made a tea of the fresh herb. I've made plenty of tea of the dry herb. It's a plant that grows all over North America. It can be found wild. Be careful. Picking it. Just make sure you know the herb and that it's not contaminated by any pesticides or something. If you decide to pick it, but it's a great herb. It's amazing for just general body strengthening, general body health. It really benefits the liver. It benefits the kidneys. It's in a famous formula called Essiac, which is used for certain kinds of cancer, especially colon cancer. But yeah, burdock. If I was going to pick one herb off the top of my head, amazing, amazing herb, amazing tonic, um, meaning something that helps you strengthen your body all around. And you can pick that up
Awesome.
in like probably Whole Foods, your local health food store. Definitely you can order it online from Mountain
Yeah,
Rose Herbs or
that's one that's not so obscure that you have to go to a Chinatown shop. You can get that just at a supermarket,
no,
probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can probably get it at some kind of supermarket or just ask around, call around.
Cool. Okay, well, I think now is as good a time as any to move on to the final section of the interview. This is how I close off
Mm-hmm.
all these talks. It's called the prana round, but maybe for today,
Okay.
just for you, we'll call it the chi round. I'm going to ask you 6 rapid fire questions and ask you to answer minimum 1 word, maximum 1 sentence. Make sense?
Okay. Yep. Got
Oh,
it.
okay. In 1 word, why do you practice yoga?
Enlightenment.
What is your favorite yoga pose and why?
Shavasana. You can hold it the longest.
Nice. Okay. What's the single best cue or piece of advice that you've ever received from a teacher?
The world's coming from me, not at me. Help people.
Recommend 1 book, modern or ancient, for our audience. You already mentioned the Tao Te Ching. If you want to say that again, or you can pick another one.
Tao Te Ching by Stephen Mitchell is nice. For lay audience, I would say the Diamond Cutter book by Geshe Michael Roach. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Internalize it. Use it daily. It's also an audio book if you prefer audio.
Great. Okay. Is yoga for everyone?
Everyone has to lay down at some point, so yes, at least Shavasana.
Okay. Last question. How can our audience get in touch with you and how can we support you in your Dharma?
Thank you. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Wordsmith Wisdom. On Facebook as Wordsmith, and looking to have an upcoming website, drwordsmithwisdom.com as well. And yeah, be in contact with me through Facebook or Instagram or the upcoming website to help me help others. The more support I receive in my projects, which range from yoga, Chinese medicine, to things like permaculture and sustainable technologies, the more I can help others. So please support.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you crystallizing so many different lineage and years of teaching into some digestible nuggets for our audience. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Henry. Thank you so much. Namaste.
If you got something out of this episode, if you like Dharma Talk and want to keep it going, please do me a huge favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. I know it's not the most convenient thing to do, but it makes all the difference in getting this show out there and more visible to other people who can benefit from it. And hey, if you've got feedback or ideas or you want to get in touch with me, you can do that on Instagram at HENRYWINS. Otherwise, I'll talk to you next week. And until then, keep living your Dharma.